good afternoon, good evening. I am Taylor Andre. This evening, we are having a dope conversation that may actually stir up some emotions. So, we talk a lot about selling grandma's house, but sometimes before you even have the opportunity to sell grandma's house, it was lost, stolen, taken by the bank, and nobody knows why. This evening, we're going to speak with Cam, who's been helping families 500 to date, making sure that they keep their house, and if they've already lost it, understanding how they could have done things differently in order to keep it, save it, give it away for the next generation. Also, the legal side. What does this look like as far as law is concerned, and your rights and your protections, and how you may have broken the law? This evening, we have attorney Jetta and we have Cam. And so I just want to bring them to the stage. Good evening, good night. How are you?
Good evening. Good evening.
How you doing? What's up, Tay? How you doing,
So
Majetta?
I want to first start with the Esquire, Attorney Jetta. Please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you before we get started.
Absolutely. So I go by Attorney Jetta, but my formal name is Attorney Morgietta de Riziere. I am a real estate attorney. I also do probate, civil litigation, and business formation. And a lot of people don't know, I actually started my career as a leasing agent. So before I went to law school, I worked for a leasing company, got my license doing that. Then I got my broker's license. I also have my real estate instructor's license. So I usually like to tell people that because I have been really, really immersed in the real estate world. I love doing it. I love that it gives people an opportunity to grow and learn. And it's a space where it's ever changing. But the reality is that you're in control. And so I've been doing this collectively now for about 14 years, and every single day is a new challenge. I do own a law practice in Norwood, Massachusetts right now, and I'm just happy and excited to be here.
Mm. Thank you. Thank you. Cam, you're up. Tell us a little bit
How
about
you
yourself.
doing? My name's Cameron Adesanya. So I started as a wholesaler, and then I pivoted into just being an investor. Then I fell into probate. It's been life changing. At first, I was super focused on the money, and then I just got introduced to an attorney doing probate. So basically, what probate is, it's just the court transferring assets from the decedent to the heirs or beneficiaries. And at first, I just was trying to buy the real estate, and then I figured out, well, maybe I can, if I can help people and do the real estate investing on the side, then maybe I can really do something special. And it's been a blessing since then. A little bit about me: I'm a kid from Lowell, raised here, born in Boston. So, I don't come from a silver spoon. I just seen an avenue
Mm.
to make money, and then I end up falling into it. I met Morgetta just, trying to find a great attorney to be able to refer to my clients. And, I've met her, and it's been awesome since. Yeah, it's been very interesting. I've been in this for roughly 2 years now, and I see myself going a lot further with this. I just love to get people the information. So that's why I'm here.
Mm. So, Attorney Jetta, let's start with you really quickly. What is the legal definition of probate? How does one fall into probate? And any fees that you can tell us that are associated with probate?
Okay, so that's a really loaded question. So I'm going to do my best to try to break it down as best as I possibly can. So let me just start off by saying everybody who is on this earth right now will need probate in one way, shape, or form. A lot of people have this misconception that I'll never need it, it'll never happen to me. You may not necessarily need the courts per se, but everybody has a probate. And essentially, a probate is what happens to you or your estate or your belongings or your things when you are no longer here on this earth, right? And I know that Taylor started off in the beginning saying that some of this might be emotional. But the reality is that it's a reality. It's an inevitable that unfortunately everybody has to face and everybody has to come to terms with. So unfortunately, sometimes people need the court system to navigate that. Sometimes people don't. I think most people are pretty familiar with the two most common terms, which are wills and trust, right? Most people have heard of a will of, or of a trust. But the general term that most attorneys refer to this process as is estate planning. If you don't have an estate plan, then you will need the probate court. So the real term really is estate planning. Do you have a plan for your estate? Do you have a plan for your belongings and your things? Do you have a plan for how you want um, the rest of your life to live out? A lot of people think that if I don't have a house, I don't have a car, I
Yeah.
don't need an estate plan. I don't need a will. I don't need a trust. But it's so much more than that. You have special wishes if something were, if you were to become incapacitated. Does your family have a special area that they all want to be together when you pass? Um, do you have a certain memorial that you want to be a part of your estate plan? So it's not just possessions themselves, it's really thinking about who you are as a person and what legacy do you want to leave behind when you're no longer here. That should be reduced to writing. I think collectively as a society, we have gone away from the fact that we're here to live out our truths on earth, but what about when we're not here? Are we leaving a legacy? Are we leaving something behind for the world to remember us by? And we
But I don't
need
have nothing to leave behind. Like everybody wants me to do estate planning, but I don't have anything to leave. Like,
you have your thoughts, you have your feelings. There are certain things that don't necessarily have to be tangible in order for you to have an estate plan. And I think that's where the big misconception is. Maybe you have certain religious requirements, and we've had people had ceremonial requirements. So it's unfortunate to think about, but if you're in the hospital and something happens to you, do you have somebody who you can call on that can make decisions for you? All of these are a part of a state plan, right? And all of these are part of decisions that you don't want to make when the time is in the moment. You want to make these decisions and you want to make these thought processes ahead of time. Unfortunately, everybody's going to get sick. Everybody's going to have to go to the hospital. Everybody's going to need medical care. Everyone's going to make these hard decisions. And I think as a community, as a society, we have to really come to terms with the fact that you shouldn't have to make that decision when it's time to make that decision. It's okay to plan ahead of that. It may be uncomfortable and awkward to talk about it in the moment, but collectively, we need to encourage each other to prepare ourselves because there are so many other communities that do. And that is how you collectively, as a community, grow and embrace different changes and different life structures is by collectively understanding that yes, this may be taboo, but it's something that we need to do together as a society to further ourselves and to grow. And I think that's why people focus so much on the tangible aspects, but it's not so much just tangible. Everybody has a gift. And if you don't think you have a gift, we need a whole other podcast and episode just for that. But everybody has a gift. And you need to take that gift and utilize that gift. And that
but I have
is
a
your
will.
legacy. Say it again.
But I have a will.
You have a will?
Yeah, not me,
So
but like the people. Why would I have to estate plan? I don't own a house. I have a will. I have a healthcare proxy. What's the importance of estate planning when it sounds like I've already done it?
so sometimes people have started portions of it, right? So that's why it's called estate planning because it's not just your will, it's not just your healthcare proxy, it's also a healthcare derivative. Does your healthcare proxy give somebody the right to pull the plug? I mean, those are cases that have been before not only the Supreme Court, but our society. Who gets to decide, without being so grim, if you live or die, right? Have you talked about that? What about medication? Do you want to take medication? Do you want to be resuscitated or not? These are things that are in the healthcare derivative that a lot of people don't have. You may have a will, and I think that's great. You may have a healthcare proxy that's great as well. But there are other tools that you can utilize in your entire estate plan that a lot of people take for granted. I think if you do have other things that you are trying to protect, if you have a will, more likely than not, you should consider doing a trust if it's necessary. Do you have kids or other loved ones that you want to specifically leave items to that you don't want to go through the probate court process for, right? That's really the purpose of a trust. And a lot of people get this misconception, well, if I have a will, I don't have to go to probate court. That's actually not true. Having a will is great. The will is going to give the court the direction in which you want your estate to go, but you still have to go to probate court. If you have a trust, the reality is that it avoids probate court altogether. And that's what a lot of people appreciate. And the fact with having a trust is that, I kind of give the example of when you're watching like those movies and everybody goes to the lawyer's office and there's like a video of the person who passed away and they're all talking, and everybody gets like these assignments where this is you. That's usually more likely or not than a trust that someone has created when you go to the lawyer's office and you figure out what you get. But even more than that,
I think the idea is that you have to understand that, like I said, it goes back to a gift. Everybody has a gift, and that gift should be memorialized and remembered
Your
some way, shape, or
sound,
form.
something happened with your sound.
Can you hear me now?
It's a little robotic.
hold on a second.
That's better. That's 1,000% better.
Better? Okay.
Yes.
So I think that's the reality is everybody has a gift, everybody has a legacy that they need to leave behind, and it should be memorialized in writing. If you have a will, great. But I think the other thing with having a will is that people have to understand these things should be checked on very frequently. A lot of people create these documents and then they just either stick them in a safe or under a bed and forget about them. You really should be reviewing this frequently every year or every 2 years to make sure it has everything that you need um, as your life goes on. Because as we know, life changes literally from day to day, but from year to year, it significantly changes. So, excuse me, you should really make sure that if you do have these documents prepared, that they're not from 1987 or they're not from 2005. They really should be living and breathing documents, just like you're a living and breathing person, and making sure that they're up to date and correct with all the information that you need that protects not only you, but your thoughts, your ideas, and your legacy.
Okay, so let's say, for instance, all of these documents are like templates. If I fill it out myself, is it the same thing as hiring an attorney to fill it out on my behalf? Let's say there's a page that needs to be notarized and I go get it notarized. Is that the same thing, or is estate planning not going to court something that I need an attorney for?
Two separate things. A lot of people, and there are agencies and companies, you can Google them. I won't say any names, but you can obviously go online and search out companies who will do what they call boilerplate documents for you. Now, the difference between that and having an attorney prepare is that these companies will give you maybe just like a quick intake sheet will be about maybe 1 to 2 pages long. They'll take that information and then they'll plug it into a already formed document that's not very specific to you. It'll have some pretty good general terms, but it's not going to be very specific to you. Now, when you work with an estate planning attorney, they're going to have at least 2 to 3 meetings with you and talk to you about your life. What's going on? Where'd you grow up? Your family? Who are your relatives? And it's a more personable conversation than just plugging in information and having it spit out a boilerplate document to you. I would equate that very synonymously to a pre-approval versus a pre-qualification. When you're scrolling on Facebook or any social media and you get these ads that say you could qualify for $500,000 for a house, and so you put in your little information and it spits out this number, and that's what we call a pre-qualification. Most people in the real estate industry know that a pre-qualification is as good as a piece of paper that it's written on. It really means nothing.
We're not going to see properties this week. No,
exactly. Not with a
We will not.
pre-qualification. We're not doing that. And so A pre-approval, as you know, is when you sit down with a loan officer or a loan broker, they pull your information, they ask you data, and it's personable specifically to you. So you and I will get two different pre-approvals, just like you and I will have two different estate plans. It can't be the same. It could be similar, maybe if we have similar backgrounds and genetic and things like that, it'll be similar, but it'd be different. So if I could give any clarification as to why having some of these companies versus an attorney prepare, I would equate it to that. It's a pre-approval versus a pre-qualification. Sure, pre-qualification is going to give you some idea of what you could possibly be qualified for, but it's not going to be accurate and it's not going to be personable to you. So if you're going to really take the time and the energy to invest in you, right, then you should probably sit down and have an attorney do it with you. Now, that's different than probate court. And so probate court is exists for people either who A, don't have any estate planning at all, which we'll get back to in a second, or if they have an estate plan, they've given the court the rules and the directions that they want them to follow, and it's already written in a document, and they want the court to make the to exercise that plan, right? So if you have a will, essentially you're giving that will to the probate court, and the probate court is the one that's going to enforce or exercise that document.
So
Now,
let's pause here for 1 second.
Yep.
Because correct me if I'm wrong, but I understand that when you now have a will that has to go to the courts in order for the courts to decipher,
right,
they charge a fee to decipher what you have written down.
Correct.
Okay. What is that percentage?
So it depends. It comes in many varying stages. There's obviously an initial fee, which is usually a filing fee. The filing fee is anywhere from $275 up to 400 something dollars just to get the document in the court. Then if you have property or have personal property, or let's say it's a contested matter, or there are people who aren't agreeing, then could be anywhere from 1 to 5% of the total value of the estate. So when somebody fills out a petition with the court, they have to certify under the pains and penalties of perjury how much they think the value of the estate is. So if the value of the estate is $500,000 or $2 million, they have to say that. And the court ultimately at the end, just in fees, to close out the estate, to move forward with the estate, to get a license to sell, could charge the estate, i.e., the petitioner, anywhere from 1 to 5% of the value of that estate. So you're looking at, if it's a $2 million estate, it's a $500,000 estate. I mean, you could do the math, right? So these are things that, unfortunately, if you have to go through the probate court to do that, these are fees that you just can't avoid. They will, I mean, you won't get through to what you need to get done without paying it to the state. Now, what I meant to circle back on earlier is that if you don't have an estate plan at all, then you do have property, even if it's just a car. We've had estate probate cases on mobile homes, right? Anything that is in your name is subject to division, unless you just want, it to just be taken by a third party entity or creditor. It's subject to the rules of what the probate court is. And so if you don't know what those rules are, or if you don't have somebody that can navigate your family as to what those rules are, then you're just leaving it up to the hands of the court for them to decide what the rules are going to be. And if you don't have somebody who's qualified who can help you decide what those rules can be, they will appoint somebody to make those decisions. And obviously that person gets paid. And obviously that money also comes from the estate, right? And if it's a very small estate, unfortunately, they get paid off the top. And so a lot of this is, that's why I keep hate to beat a dead horse, but it's called estate planning, because the idea is that you want to plan this ahead of time so you're not dealing with this, or your family is not dealing with this under a crisis or under duress or under emotional stress that could essentially be avoided or mitigated in some way, shape, or form ahead of time. Hopefully that wasn't too much information all at
No,
once.
so I completely understood that. And if you didn't understand, you can definitely go back, rewatch, digest, or ask your questions in the comments. So let's say, for instance, I do have a fully planned estate, and
Yep.
I do have a house, and I do have a car, and I have, one or two pieces of jewelry.
Yep.
I come to you, I do my estate plan. Does the court have to touch it? If not, why not? Did we lose you? Cam, I think
Can you
we
hear me?
lost. Yeah, there you go. There you go.
So as long as you have a properly prepared estate plan, and part of the strategy of preparing that estate plan is to avoid the probate court, then no, you wouldn't have to go through the probate court. A lot of people prepare estate plans. Again, one of the mechanisms you can use is a trust, because they don't want their information to be out there in the open. They want it to be more private. They want it to be, so to speak, kept in the family. So they create the essential tools that they need, that they don't have to go through the probate court, and they don't have to worry about the fees, and they don't have to worry about the court making certain decisions. So yes, you have a house, you have a car, you have some jewelry, and you already know how you want that to be, um, you know, utilized amongst your family when you're no longer here. Then there are proper mechanisms and channels that you can use so that you don't have to go through the, as people call it, the stress of going through the probate court. But if you don't, then you're just subject to it, and there's just no way around it.
It's like, would you rather invest in the preventative or the reactive? Because either way, you're going to have to spend the money. You rather,
You're gonna have to spend it either way. And
no,
sorry,
go
go
on. I'm
ahead.
sorry.
I was gonna say again, hate to tie it to real estate, but it just makes sense, so much sense all the time. It's like people who don't get home inspections, right? And I'm all for waiving or modifying. I get that, how it works, and making it attractive. But if you're buying a $500,000 house, you should get a home inspection, even if it's just for informational purposes. You should know how that house functions and works, and things of that nature, just like you should have an estate plan, so that you don't have to do certain things when you're under crunch time and under crisis. Um, it's a preventative measure, like Cam said.
Absolutely, because you don't want to be going through or have your family go through that situation, mourning you at the same time of, having to take care of a house and take care of their house and their lives,
What are some situations that you've seen, Cam, and some situations that you were able to avoid due to the information that you share with families?
So speaking of, there was one situation at the beginning of the year. Everybody was fine and dandy. They went through the probate process already, so they already got through the headaches, and then they started fighting. One sister got upset with another sister, and she pulled out selling me the real estate, which was, like, it's whatever to like pull out with me, but for them, they're kind of banking on the money, and they start fighting. So now they're fighting over the estate, spending the estate's money. It's like, you're just wasting the money, but, they have to file a partition and all this fun stuff. And it just calls for a huge headache. But preventative, I've actually told a lot of my friends, real estate friends, investors, like, hey, this is not promised forever, so I think you should get a living trust. Coincidentally, I mean, I shouldn't say coincidentally, but told a friend to get a living trust. And I mean, his mother died like 4 weeks after I told him to get this. And granted, he has his name on the deed and stuff, but he was just like, it just shows you how fickle life is. Like, you want to make plans instead of the plans making you. These things are going to happen. You might as well just be forward thinking, even the whole reason I even got started on this. So there were, like I said, I was doing assignments. There was 2 little girls. Their parents died 6 months between each other because of COVID. And I didn't know what probate was. I didn't know any of this stuff. I only knew buy the house, right? Not to keep the house. Well, once that happened and like the situation ended up working out, I started having these tough conversations with my family. Like, listen, we got to start getting ourselves in place. My stepmom, she owns a couple rental units. I'm like, we got to get a living trust. And, these are hard conversations to have. So I'm very big on preventative. And yes, I'm a real estate investor, but I like to tell people the truth. Like, this is just the reality of things, the hardest part is those conversations. A lot of people don't like to hear that. Like, oh, I'll get it later. I'll get it later. Well, I see a lot of cases to where even recently, Jetta can attest, I met an attorney in Maryland, and she's an attorney for medical malpractice, but she's actually going through the probate process to where her mom and her sister died. And now she has to probate 2 estates while grieving, and possibly battling a conservator. So it's a lot to deal with,
And we've heard that word quite a few times, Attorney Jetta, when we talk about Britney Spears, when we hear about Wendy Williams. What is a conservator and how do they help or hurt the estate?
A conservator is a person that is appointed by the courts to manage the financial affairs of an individual. Usually, it couples with a guardianship, which gives the person the right to make day-to-day decisions about a person. Where do they live? What do they eat? And in some cases, what medication should they take? But the conservatorship is the financial piece. So when you're talking about, again, Wendy Williams, Britney Spears, the reason why a lot of those cases are familiar, popular, make the news is because conservators, generally speaking, depending on when and how they get appointed, have full reign and control over bank accounts, personal property, real estate property, anything that that person has, and they get to make that decision, whether the person quote unquote likes it or not, whether the family quote unquote likes it or not. That conservator has really, really extreme powers, but it's usually
Hold on.
under
How does
extreme.
how does the court pick this person? If it's not in my estate, the court can just pick whomever. That doesn't have to be my family.
So remember, estate planning is usually for someone who passes.
Mhm.
Guardianships and conservatorships are for people who are still alive. And sometimes when we're living, we become what they call incapacitated, or we can't make decisions, or it seems like the decisions that we're making are counterintuitive, allegedly, and that's the big thing with the whole Wendy Williams, Britney Spears, allegedly making decisions that are not in our best interest. Now, usually, and I use with a caveat, usually they will pick a trusted family member or friend or somebody who is close to the person who qualifies. Obviously, they do background checks and things of that nature to be the conservator, right? The conservator also gets a bond, which means that technically they're supposed to be protected from just spending the money in the estate. They also have to do things like provide an accounting and inventory. So there are checks and balances per se, but I think the problem that most people have with, again, some of these higher profile cases is that the checks and balances are just on paper, and this person allegedly is still given free reign. So to answer your question, Typically, it's somebody that the person knows or trusts, or is known or trusted, or in other circumstances, which is similar to the one that Kim is talking about, they will appoint a third party, which makes it difficult. And the third party obviously is not known to the person. Um, in Massachusetts, typically it is an attorney, but it also could be a social worker that has worked with the courts for many years. And unfortunately, that person, you know, may not have as close as a tie or close relationship with the family, and it creates tension, right? And so, again, the idea is that the conservatorship and guardianship is only for the benefit of the person while they're alive. If for some reason that person is deceased and they did have an estate plan, now again, assuming that they created the estate plan before they became incapacitated, right, and unable to make decisions, um, assuming that was already prepared, then their estate plan would kick in, right? But the idea is that people get upset and tensions usually rise. It's when it's a third party, and sometimes they're not very, how should we say, emotionally engaging with the
Mhm.
family, and it becomes frustrating because the family wants answers. They want to know how their loved one is doing, and sometimes that's not always readily available. Um, and I think that's the challenge with some of these cases, is that these conservators and guardians are so far removed that it's almost as if they have this autonomy, that they are just running the show, that there's no personal touch and there's no emotional connection, with that person or with the family. And
I
it
like to
and it
call
just
it build calluses on their hands, and I totally understand why. At first, I
yeah.
was like, "Oh, why this? Why that?" Now I'm like, "Oh, I kind of understand."
Hmm.
You're dealing with a lot of distressed people. This is
Yes.
probably like the worst time in someone's life when someone dies. You know, so just you definitely have to build calluses at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it sounds like all of that could have been avoided had they had an estate plan and they could have told where they wanted, like, if something was to happen to me, this is what I want.
Right.
That
Right.
goes for, like, I have little requests. Like, I know this, my kids are like, listen, if anything ever happens to mommy, this is what I want. But it's completely different when you have it on paper. So
Yes.
they, even though they know, it has to be respected from everybody outside. And
Correct.
And it's like, oh, mom said this, dad said this. Well, mom and dad are not here to defend their word. Like, I'm pretty sure you guys have kids, right? So it's like they're beefing. You can't break it up because you're not here no more. So
Right.
that's kind of what I went through at the beginning of the year. They're arguing, well, dad said I can keep the house. Well, dad said I can keep the car. And it's like, dad said on paper that he wants to sell both and keep you guys keep the money. But
Yeah.
whatever.
And it gets even worse when, and not to throw a wrench into all of this, but sometimes we get cases where people make requests on their deathbed, right? And obviously that's a really sensitive time for somebody. Sometimes people have remorse or they have guilt and they're trying to unload these things off of their chest. And in a moment's time, they're like, you know what? I want you to have the house. Or, we've actually had
what
this
if
one
that
case, it was
happened? But
crazy.
I'm there and I record it.
Yeah.
So
So, there is this concept, and you guys can, obviously look it up offline. It's called a holographic will,
Mm.
which essentially is not a will in the traditional sense, but it's evidence that a person technically made a request. And you also have to take into consideration, were they under medication, like how close were they to, passing. But there is this concept called a holographic will, which is not a will that's notarized. There's no witnesses. It's just somebody on their deathbed. We actually had a case where um, the person who passed away wrote on a napkin what they wanted, and there were people in the room, but it wasn't formally notarized and all that stuff. And we had a full litigation on whether or not that was that person's true wish, right? And if
Oh,
that's what they wanted to happen. Even though it was written on a napkin. So it's this concept called a holographic will. Sometimes it goes your way, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes you have people who are especially when, we're talking about end of life care. Sometimes they have morphine, they have all these, things in their system. So are they in the right state of mind? Things like that. But there are case law that actually protects individuals who make certain requests on their deathbed, and it's under this theory called a holographic will.
That's
So it
crazy. Like
goes your way,
Aretha
sometimes it
Franklin.
does, sometimes it doesn't.
Like
Mm.
Aretha Franklin, her kids, her four boys are arguing over she wrote it on like a piece of paper, and her four boys are arguing over the estate, and they're
Right.
spending the estate's money. So it's like,
Yeah. And that's what happens. At the end of the day, it goes towards fees, right?
mhm.
And a lot of that, can be avoided. The other really popular, I shouldn't say popular, it's really sad to say, but in Massachusetts, we don't have what they call common law marriage, right? So if you're with the guy and you're with the girl and y'all been together for 15 years, 20 years, 25 years, 35 years, whatever many years, you're not married, you're not on the deed, you're not on the mortgage, you don't get the house. I mean, and I think that's unfortunate because a lot of times people, we at one point years ago we used to have 1 second.
Now I'm interested in what she was about to say. Cam, talk to me about like
So
talk to
common
me
law
about.
marriage is when like you've been together with somebody
Oh
for
no,
so
no.
long and they just recognize it as a marriage.
So a lot of that is like more so in southern states. I
Mm.
believe we can ask when she comes back, but I believe Massachusetts used to be common law marriage, and then it was like revoked at some point or voted on. But I could be wrong with that. For you and probate and
Mm.
what you're working on, who are typically the people that you speak to?
So, I mean, I like to speak to investors and older people. I mean, the investors, the preventative, I can talk to them, have them set up estate plans with one of my attorneys, especially, like, hey, you need to do this. And older people, because, I mean, in the life, they might be interested in liquidating their estate, getting rid of their property. A lot of them, like, want to sell their property because they don't want to deal with it anymore, So, but I mean, just to be transparent, I'm a real estate investor, like that's my bread and butter. But I like this side being able to prevent as well, because, when people know that, hey, I can go to Cam and he can handle the process in total, then it just gets easier, I'm trying to get rid of these lights.
Welcome back, Attorney
I'm
Jetta.
back.
Welcome
I'm
back.
back. Sorry, just multitasking today.
What's up,
So
V?
So
essentially,
we
sorry, go
were
ahead.
wondering, while was Massachusetts a common law state at one time?
Many. So Massachusetts has and still has what they call blue laws, which are laws that at one point weren't really reduced to writing, but everybody understood what they meant, right? Part of the, not to go off topic, but part of that was, things like liquor licenses, which is why, the fact that we had the bill that was passed recently was such a big thing because, at one point you technically couldn't buy liquor on Sundays. That's why a lot of liquor stores weren't open on Sundays, because it was a blue law that you just couldn't do it. So anyways, common law marriage at one point did exist, but it no longer exists. And the reason why that's important is that, especially when you're doing estate planning, guardianship, conservatorship, the courts do not recognize anything that's not, if you're not married, your name's not on the deed, your name's not on the mortgage, just doesn't exist to them. And so, unfortunately, you know, if someone is with more than one person, sometimes you have people fighting over that, or you know um not formally unionized by marriage, then yeah, you don't, the it could go to the brother or the mother or somebody else that's, not particularly you. And so that it's really important to protect yourselves, and that's really what it is about at the end of the day.
Mm. So, what are some of the things that we can do in order to ensure that we don't need Cam in our life. He said he's an investor. He gonna buy the house. If you're gonna sell it, you can't manage it. But before we get there, I would like to help you. So what are some of the, like, what steps do you take to help families so that they're not the people who you end up selling the house?
First and foremost, people need to talk. Like, this is a great platform. Just having those really, we call them awkward discussions, but they're really not, because people have them all the time. It's just that we collectively as a society just need to just be comfortable with this concept. So the
Like,
number
it's
one.
my business, is my business. Don't ask me about my business. You better act like you know what these elders are
And
talking
I
about.
do. And you know what? We are coming to a point generationally, right? That
Mhm.
we are unfortunately starting to become the elders, or our siblings are, or our cousins are. And so we are the breakthrough. Everybody's talking about these generational curses. We are we are the breakthrough of the generational curse. So yes, there may be certain people who are lingering that have that mentality, but we are getting to the stage in our lives and our careers where it's not too late for us. And so
Mhm.
it's a top down thing from where we are, right? A lot of us, obviously we know America is a melting pot. So some of these families, you can't say you're first generation anymore, right? That is a little bit out the window. Some people still are, but for the most part, we're second, third generation people from different countries, different, ethnicities, backgrounds. But even our family generationally, we're getting to a place where educationally we're exposed to more, obviously due to the internet and things of that nature. So you might not be able to reach the generation upwards or two generations up, but we can definitely start with ourselves and start down. And
Mhm.
that's how you continue to pass it along. So number one is having the conversation. Number two is really just identifying what you want, right? How do you want to leave a legacy? What is it that you want to leave? What are your thoughts, your ideas, if you, quote unquote, don't have anything of personal asset? But if you do have things that are personal assets, what's your vision? Do you have any specific requests? And I'm a big writer. I have like an electronic journal. I think that, writing, I don't know where it went out the window, but got to get back to writing and just writing things down, and just putting pen to paper, so to speak, and just getting thoughts and ideas and visions out there, because that's how we grow as a community. um, and then once you're ready, seek professional assistance, right? The key word there is professional, because
How
people will
much
take
would
your
that
money.
cost? If let's say we come to the table and we are completely discombobulated, not because we're meaning to come to you, you know, all scattered. It's we don't even know what questions to ask ourselves to have the answers for you. And so where is a good place to start to even get those questions or to have these conversations? What are we actually talking about here? And what are some of the things that will help us write these things down so when we do see you, when we do spend time with an attorney of our choosing, then we can go ahead and move forward? And what does that look like financially?
I think the other thing is too, people feel like they have to know all the answers all up front, but that's not your job. That's the professional's job. Just like in any career path, your job is not to figure the things out. Your job is just be present. So we want you to just come to us and be present and be human and be yourself. And we navigate through those things with you. If it's a challenge that you're facing, if it's something that's difficult for you, or something that your family's never done. So you don't have to have all the answers and the rules and things of that nature. You just have to be present and available and willing to show up and willing to assist to do the work. I think most estate planning attorneys, they have what's called a discovery call, and that discovery call could be 45 minutes to an hour and a half, and that's really just about figuring out who you are as a person, your family, what assets you have, what kind of estate plan fits for you, And sometimes those discovery calls really are not that expensive. I know for us, our discovery calls are usually about $200, but we go through everything with you. Um, what do you have, what you don't have, what we suggest, what you need. And that sometimes is just a sigh of relief in and of itself, just so that you know what you don't know, right? Just to get the questions answered, just to get your thoughts out there. And sometimes that just helps people like, you know what, this is actually more information that I had before. And now I need to know what to do and I'm ready to move forward. Or I need to take a step back and clean up my own house, before I take this next leap. And so I think the idea is to be present, even if you don't think that you have all the answers, because you don't need to have all the answers right away.
I love that. So we are coming to the top of the hour. Cam, is there anything you want to add?
I mean, more or less, like I said, we handle both preventative and reactive cases. So it's like whatever you need help with. So don't feel like you said, you have to know everything to come this way. But like I said, I like to implore people, if you can't afford a living trust, get an estate plan. If you can't afford that, at least talk to an attorney so you can get on the right track to understand what you're doing. If not, eventually I'll be knocking, I mean, no, not to go cynical, right? But like I said, I preach preventative and also I handle the reactive. So I mean, just reactively, I usually handle like the cleanups, the estate preservation, winterization, but I also purchase the real estate. I'm not an agent, but I work with you, so it gets easier. Just to be able to maximize the inheritance. Sometimes they do have enough time, so it's like, okay, let's clean this up and fix it up, see what needs fixing, and then we can list it, kind of thing. As opposed to like, do you need the cash offer right now?
Yeah.
But yeah.
Well, Attorney Jetta, thank you so much for putting us on the right path. And I would ask that you go ahead and drop your information so we can share it out. Or this is currently live on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. Tayla Andre Everything, TaylaAndre. And if you could just drop your information in some of the chats there, it'll forever not be deleted. And so they can always come back if they have any questions. And just to clarify, because you may have heard this for the first time and it may have been a lot. So you may have to go back, listen to the replay, get a better understanding of where you are in your journey and how you can take yourself to the next level. And so I just want to thank our guest for giving you the information that you need. It's not only about Tayla making real estate easy, it's about making your life easy, helping you get a better understanding. Cam can knock on your door now and be helpful, or he can knock on the door later and unfortunately look like the bad guy. And so this is the reality of real life. And they are difficult conversations. It's difficult when you have to deal with the reality that grandma, grandfather, auntie, uncle, someone did not have their ducks lined up in a row. That's not 1,000% your fault. It's not 1,000% their fault. But when you know better, you have to do better. And the reason why we compare our notes to our peers and still have less on paper is because we don't take care of the documentation. You cannot ignore it. It's not like something that comes in a bill that comes in the mail, and you just set it to the side and you think it goes away. For a long time, we did that with our credit, and where did it get us? And that's why so many people today are doing credit restoration, credit repair, credit cleanup in order to get on track when you should have been on track years ago. When you know better, you do better. You learn a little bit by day. And the part that is most important is the implementation, picking up the phone and taking the next step to putting you on the correct path. So I thank you. I appreciate you. I love you. I want to say thank you one more time to our guests.
Thank you for having me. Thank you, Morjetta. I really
having
appreciate you as well.
Of course.
You guys are awesome.
All right.
All right, then.
Have
Have
a
a
good night.
wonderful evening.
Thank you.
You're welcome.